What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Wednesday, May 1st, first of the month. It's going to be May. Let's go. It
Damn,
is
I was
Wacky
say
Wednesday. Oh, Desi's Thunder. Well, joining me as always on a Wednesday is that you can still say it, Desi. You can still say it.
It's gonna be May.
There you go. You have to sing it. So there you go. I didn't sing it. You sang it. That's perfect. All right. Well, Desi, how you doing today? It's been a while since I've spoken with you. Well, just since last Wednesday, but it feels like a long time because we had the draft in between that. It was a long, 3 days for that. So how are you doing? How are you feeling about the draft?
What's up, faithful? Yeah, it's so crazy. So just for context, this is my first official draft. Like, I have never gone through the whole process because I don't watch college ball. So in my brain, I'm like, well, I don't know college ball, so why would I even watch the draft? La 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 la. Well, now that I've turned into the psycho fan, I've now started to pay attention and look at different players and kind of watch their play and start to understand some things. And so what I know is it's a crapshoot, right? Like, just historically, it looks like it's really tough to put all your eggs in one basket. So that said, obviously you guys who watch us every week knows that I was big for the O lineman. So my heart was, I'm not going to lie, a little broke when we got a wide receiver, but I live in Florida, guys. And so what do I know is Gator ball and Seminole ball. So we got a Gator and we got a Seminole. So not bad. Actually, we got two Seminoles. So I was really stoked. And a couple of my friends kind of went crazy when I posted on my Facebook page, because that's where all my Florida people are. And they were like, Pretty Ricky, y'all got Pretty Ricky. And so I guess his nickname is Pretty Ricky.
Pretty Ricky, Slick Rick.
Yeah.
They're calling him Yak Harlow now. I mean, Let's see how he does in the NFL with Yak before we start.
Exactly.
The name is epic as Yak Harlow.
And I'll say also, you guys know that I was big for Kool-Aid just because I had like a side hustle ready to go. But that's just being, just trying to have fun with it all. But at the end of the day, it was really intriguing. I looked back at your list and I kind of put, I don't know, I put like LOL or like, I forgot what I put back on your post from when you put your big grid up. We did all this work on your beautiful grid. And I think there was like 2 players on the grid that we ended up drafting from that grid. So it's really interesting. The 49ers front office definitely like to keep their cards close to their chest. And I can respect that. I'm a poker player, so I can respect that. I think I'm happy. I don't think that I'm not going to lie. I'm still got some worries. I'm still worried about offensive tackle. I'm on that side of the 49er fandom. I do think there's some options that we have that may work, but I also know that in order to get the type of left tackle, potential future left tackle that we needed, we would have had to have traded some folks out. And I didn't necessarily like that option either. So.
Yeah, I think I truly believe Roger Rosengarten is who the 49ers wanted, and he went the pick right before to the Ravens. So I think once that happened, they're probably like, okay, what do we do now? And, they did draft Pooney in the 3rd round, so the round after that, which is not too bad. And they did say, like, okay, he can play tackle in a pinch, but he isn't a tackle at the next level, right? So, yes, he could do it in an emergency situation, but not going to be the guy who's going to, knock off Colton McKivitz, for example, or someone who's going to be the successor to Trent Williams, right? So we're probably looking at, the guy who's going to be filling in for Aaron Banks and or John Feliciano should any of those guys have an injury this season, but also he'll probably have a better chance next season, 2025, for either of those spots. And I believe he played mostly on the left side of the line in college. But we're here to talk about some of the injuries that some of these guys have had throughout their college careers. Now, look, the first 2 picks, if it makes anyone feel any better, Ricky Pearsall and Bernardo Green, pretty clean bill of health for both of those guys, and I think that's a good sign. Dominic Cooney, however, did have a torn MCL in his left knee in 2021. He was able to come back from that and had great seasons in 2022 and 23, as you guys see here. But Desi, is this something that can potentially happen again in the future for Pooney? Is this something that would hinder him, a couple years down the line?
I don't think so. In at his position, an MCL tear, it depends on if it was a partial or a full tear. I don't, college players, it's really hard to get information on. You don't get all the details like you do with certain NFL players. So I'm not sure if this was a torn partial, which, they can cast those. They can put them in a knee immobilizer. It can scar back down. It can be and scar tissue tends to be a little bit more stronger than the tissue that was there before it. Surgery, I don't worry too much about an MCL. I don't know how his body looks. So when you look at somebody's legs, you want to look at them from their hip down. If they have flat-footedness, and I talked about this with Eric Armstead's injuries, and I think I might have said something about Trent Williams. If they have, you have your arches of your feet. Let me see if I can put this. And your arches kind of put your foot on this little side. If you have a high arch, you're going to be more like this hand here. If you have a basic arch, it could be here. But when you're flat-footed, it kind of then puts a stress on the ankle. It's really hard. I don't want to put my foot on the screen. I'm not rolling like that. But it when your feet flat, it stresses the ankles, and then it stresses the knees, and then it stresses the hips, and all the way up. It can even cause some back pain. So if you guys are having any of those issues, look at your feet, see if they're flat-footed, put a little insert in there, see if it changes things. But I say that to say if he's flat-footed, it could put a little bit more pressure on that inside part of the knee. So the MCL is on the inside part of the knee. So where your knees touch, that's the inside part of the knee. And so that's where that ligament is. So I don't know. It just depends on, I'd have to look and see what his legs look like to see if he has a natural stress to that area of the knee. If he's flat-footed, he would. But you can always have braces and stuff like that would help support.
I can just imagine, Desi being able to see Pooney for the first time on TV and like trying to get a good look at his legs and his feet. Like, if she ever saw him in person, she'd be looking down at his feet like, what's going on over there?
I do.
That's things you think about.
You can see it when they walk, surprisingly. So that's what I do, guys. I look at people's bodies for a living.
Okay, so Pooney, we're not so worried about. That's good. I mean, 3rd round pick. And like I said, he had 2 good seasons after this injury, so a good indication that he's doing all right after that. Then we have Malik Mustafa, 49ers 4th round picks. He had a torn ACL also in 2021, so a couple years removed now from that one, and he had good seasons after that. And ACL, year, Desi, but I feel like they're not as detrimental as they used to be for athletes. So what can you say about that?
So ACL tears are dependent on a couple of things. And I'm seeing the chat here, just so that you guys know, I am a medical provider. I'm a physician assistant. I've worked in medicine for a long time. So I'm not a random coach talking about injuries. I'm Coach Desi because what I do in my job is I help people in weight loss. And so I feel like I have to coach people to better health. And so I just kind of use coach as a term of just the way that I look at helping people in their health journeys. But ACL tears are dependent upon a couple of things. I don't know if they use the athlete's own tissue, which you would if you feel like that's a viable option, or if they used a cadaver. Now, one thing to be concerned about, there are people in the world that have hyperextended joints. So like if the term double jointed is probably what people hear most commonly. They're just super flexible. And if you have really loosey-goosey joints, you probably don't want to use the athlete's own tissue to repair an ACL because they're going to tear again. So there's a lot of things that depend on whether it was harvested from their own tissue or whether this was a cadaver tissue. The other thing is it's surgeon dependent. So I believe it was Odell Beckham. Was it Odell Beckham? I think it was Odell Beckham that had an ACL tear and elected to not use the team physician for where he was and got traded somewhere else and used a different physician. And then he retore. That was when he retore with the Chargers. And when they went in to redo it, it sounds like whoever did the original surgery didn't do something correctly, or, it was kind of like a busted job. So, there's a lot of, no one can really, there's no crystal ball that tells you whether someone's going to re-tear that or not. But generally, most surgeons do a really good job with ACL tears. And then it's all rehab after that. And how well did they rehab? How much effort did they put into that rehab? And kept that, nice and strong, because all of your quad and the musculature around the knee is what stabilizes it when you have some injuries. So it's really important to do the rehab process. So the fact that it was done in 2021, he's had some good seasons after, leads me to believe that this is something that should be okay moving forward. But he is, in the secondary. That's where all those big hits and high impact injuries can happen, right? We saw that with Huff. And so that's like my big thing here, because I think one thing you wanted to talk about was, what does this mean for other players? Well, Huff has an ACL tear. So who's going to come back stronger and be able to take that position out there on the field? I'm still a Huff fan, so I'm hopeful, but always looking for other players that can, fill us out in the backfield.
Another aspect to it too is that Mustafa, for example, is one of the younger guys that they drafted in the draft. Like, he turns 22 next month in June. So when you look at that as well, I mean, that plays into it too, I would imagine, as far as, this guy's young. I mean, his healing cells or whatever, probably work a lot faster than someone who's maybe 24 and up or something in that range, right? Even if it's just a couple years.
Yeah, and actually, fun fact. So yes, you're absolutely right. Anyone with a younger age, they heal way faster. So think of a broken bone in a kid, they're going to be healed in like 3 to 4 weeks. Adults are going to be solid 4 to 6 weeks, right? But ACL tears in adults a certain age, like if you're just, let's say you're a truck driver or you work at Starbucks, or, and you're like 35, 40 years old and you tear your ACL, they're going to say, well, you can live without your ACL. You're not, out there playing sports and doing all these things. So just, I love the opportunity to talk to and educate people who don't know things. They think, oh, this is what this athlete did. Yeah, that's the high impact athlete, the high level athlete. But for us day-to-dayers, if we tear our ACLs and we're in advanced age, it's definitely different conversations that may happen.
I like the air quotes around advanced age. I mean, you're trying to be as nice as possible.
Well, I'm still refusing to believe I'm in advanced age, so I have to use that.
I mean, I like it. I mean, it's a certain level of delusional that I'm also at as well. So I hear you. But Desi, this is probably the one that I'm most worried about, and not just because he was drafted in the 4th round by Kyle Shanahan, and he's a running back, because Isaac Guerendo, 23 games in college due to injury, and he did play 41, so he does have experience despite that, but 23 is a lot. And what I saw in his injury history was 2 separate years where he was impacted and missed several games due to a hamstring injury, and then the torn Lisfranc ligament as well. So what's your concern level on Isaac Guerendo and injury history and what it could mean for him potentially going forward?
So for those of you that follow me on Twitter, I tweeted out right beforehand that, some 49er fans are not going to like what I have to say. And that's really comes from, if you're in that camp where you just want to pull your hair out when he, drafts a running back, when Kylan decides to pull a running back, this is not going to be good news to you. Raise of hands if you listen to Wacky Wednesdays with Steph and I every Wednesday, because we do give some good content. Because this was one of the ones. So when I finally got to the grid, your nice draft sheet, this
Yeah, the draft.
beautiful
Yep.
piece of artwork that you developed. And I finally put my contributions on there and put the injury listings. I believe I came on one Wednesday and showed you the highlighted names of the ones that I had concerns about. Guess who was a highlighted name?
Mr. Isaac Garendo.
Yes, yes, ma'am. So the reason why I was concerned is all the reasons you just said. In 2 different years, hamstring injuries, right? That's not terribly uncommon for running back, but hamstring injuries, look what we deal with Debo. 9 times out of 10 when he gets injured, it's his hamstring. Of course, this past year he had a lot of shoulder stuff, but once you have a tear in your hamstring, whether it's a small one, whether it's a bigger one, that gets healed up with scar tissue, and that scar tissue is not very flexible. It's kind of rigid, it's hard. And so when you go to have a high impact burst of injury of movement, power move, your muscles contract real quick and you can tear at that same place, like right where that scar tissue is. So you're more likely to have hamstring tears the more you do it. So that's not great news. And then let's talk about a Liz Frank ligament. So in the foot, Liz Frank injuries happen in what's called the midfoot. So the ball of your foot is like right underneath your kind of where your toes meet your feet, at that little pad there. When you raise up on your toes, that's kind of where your forefoot is. Your midfoot is right behind that. And then you have your heel in the back. So that middle part of your foot is where you have these metatarsals is what they're called, these bones there. And so this injury is kind of they almost call it like a trauma injury. So trauma is high impact injury. So where you run and you get your foot stuck, planted, and it twists, that's where you can crack multiple bones in that midfoot area. And so it's usually a plant and twist. Oftentimes the horseback riders, if they fell off their horse, their foot would be stuck in the strap, and then they would fall and twist. And so Liz Frank injuries can actually really cause problems to the athlete and can potentially be like a career ending injury. So there's different levels to this depending on how severe and how many fractures and was there surgical intervention that was needed. So it's hard to tell, but I don't love this kind of fracture in a running back. I don't love it in any athlete, to be honest with you, because it can just cause a lot of pain in that forefoot area. But I don't know enough about it to tell you whether this is something that is going to work or not work. That in conjunction with the hamstring injuries, I'd lie if I say if I wasn't having some concerns about his injury. I always root for players, so this is not like me saying, it was a trash move or any of that. He could be a very talented athlete and still have production, but even it would just, in my mind, be for how long, right? So it'll be interesting to see how this works out, especially because I think we're looking at him as you have here, kick return possibilities.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah.
And so just to give some context to the injuries and when they occurred in his college career. So we mentioned 2 separate years of the hamstring. So first, 2019, he missed the first 8 games with that. And then in 2020, missed the final 6 games with that as well. And then in 2021, he missed the final 9 games with the left foot. That was a Liz Frank. So, yeah, I mean, what I did want to ask you about, Desi, I know you say like we have limited information and that totally makes sense. But just the fact that a hamstring could keep someone out as many as 6-8 games, I mean, they have different grades, right, of hamstring injuries or tears or pulls, things like that, right? So to miss that many games, like, does that give you a sense of how many, like, what the grade was both of those times?
Not necessarily. I mean, was it attempts of re-tearing? I don't watch college. I don't know what his, if he was solidly out or he was out and there was talks of him coming back and he re-injured. I don't know, the process of that, but it had to have been pretty significant to have missed that much time. But he's also a running back, right? So, I mean, you have to have those, that's just a power of legs pushing through. And, grinding position that we already know that they don't have a great longevity in the league. So it's just a difficult situation, but it doesn't look good when you're missing that many games in college.
Yeah, so that was my first thought. It wasn't just the injuries, like you said, having a hamstring for injury for a running back. That's not uncommon. But the amount of games missed definitely was a concern. Now, if it makes anyone feel any better, 2022 and 2023 seem to be healthy seasons for him in that regard. So that's good. And then, one of the things with Guerrero is like he didn't have a lot of time as a start. Like he only had one start in his college career. That was pretty much his role. That's going to be his role most likely in the NFL as well. Being a career backup or just change of pace guy, right? And so when you think about tread on the tires for running backs, do you feel like that's a real thing, or does that kind of get like overblown a little bit? Do you see it as a good thing that maybe he didn't have as many carries as like a workhorse starting guy?
Yeah, I think that matters, right? I mean, but it also matters what they do in the off season, how well they take care of their body. It matters if they're doing a lot of mobility work. I usually give people a pass in that 2020 season about injuries, usually because a lot of times that year was COVID, right? And we missed entire off season to prepare and preseason to prepare. But his injury was towards the end. So I don't know, again, I don't know what their training staff is like. I don't know what his, how much mobility work he was doing and flexibility. I don't know what his tissue is like. And so there's a lot that goes into these injuries, and maybe he got better because maybe the training staff got better, right? Maybe he said, okay, I'm done with all these injuries. I got to really start taking care of my body. So Christian McCaffrey was one when that trade happened and I started to really look at his injury history. I was like, no, I think this is a good move because he really takes care of his body. When he got injured that one year that was really bad, it was 2020, and he was one that got injured in those first 6 weeks of the season. Like everybody, a good chunk of the NFL, there was a lot of players. It was the most injuries they'd had in a season, and it was because they didn't have that preseason time. So these questions are always difficult to answer, but I did flag him as a concern even before the draft.
Clearly, the 49ers did not. Now, we'll just have to wait and see what, the future entails for Isaac Guerrero, and hopefully we hope he can stay healthy, right? Like, obviously, you don't want to be proven right and then him
okay to be wrong.
Injuries and
totally okay to be wrong.
I had a feeling, Desi. I had a feeling. All right, so the 49ers 6th round pick, Jarrett Kingston, offensive guard from USC, also played at Washington State. He's another guy who did have some one injury in college, and to be quite frank, I don't know the details. Like we tried to research a little bit before the show. I couldn't find anything. Desi, I don't think you were able to find anything about what this leg injury was. We just know it was a right leg injury in 2022, and it did end his season. So I think he missed 4 games, and so enough to end that season for him. But yeah, I mean, we don't know.
I think I read somewhere that his ankle got rolled up on, or his leg. It was his leg that got rolled up on, and so I feel like maybe it was an ankle or foot, just based on the wording. But I have nothing to base it off of otherwise.
Now, and again, we want to be clear that we don't know what the injury is specifically, but just in general, how important are your legs for an offensive lineman? I mean, I gotta think it's your base, it's your balance, it's your everything for these big men. So how might that impact an offensive lineman in having a strong base, things like that?
Well, I know he's not offensive lineman, but look at Eric Armstead, right? Plantar fasciitis and the things that he dealt with his feet. It's everything. That's exactly where everything is, like you said, foundation, great term, right? So you're just putting those feet in the dirt and you're anchoring and you're pushing. And And so you've got to have a strong lower body, strong core to help push through and move people. That's the whole objective, is to block and move. And so, I'm not terribly concerned about this one.
Yeah.
Again, it was in 2020. Obviously, he recovered from that. He's done well. So, and it's not uncommon for linemen to get dinged up here and there with certain things like this. I mean, that's where a lot of, you've got a lot of people falling down. Like I said, somebody rolled up on your ankle or your leg, and that's where some ugly injuries can certainly happen. So, just thankful it wasn't anything major, because otherwise I think it would have been a little bit more reported on what the actual injury was if it was worse. So,
yeah. And Technic Sheik here asked, did someone in one of the other lives say that Guerrero reached out to CMC about his training regimen? I feel like someone mentioned that, but don't recall. I don't know I don't think it was on my show that someone mentioned that, but the only thing I remember is that Guerrero said, like, he's gonna probably annoy CMC because he's gonna have so many questions for him. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if one of them had to do with Christian McCaffrey's training, because that guy trains like a freak. But yeah, I can't say for sure. I really don't recall. I'd have to look back at the transcript of his presser.
It's not a bad thing to do. On my podcast during this, my podcast is only up during the season, but we talked about Christian McCaffrey's training. Like, he does like animal movements, and he does underwater breath work. And I mean, this guy is really intentional with his body and training. Almost, I watched that show Quarterback and watched like Patrick Mahomes and how he puts his body in different positions and contortions. And, it's kind of very much similar to just trying to make sure the body knows how to prevent injury. What do we got here?
Yeah, so this is what Isaac Guerrero did say when asked about Christian McCaffrey in his presser. He said, quote, "I was just telling my family I think that he's probably going to get annoyed with me and how many questions I'll ask him, just because of the amount of production he has and continues to have, and how consistent he is, and then his recovery plan, just all that stuff." And I'll end the quote right there. But I mean, his recovery plan, like, that's part of it, right? Oh, sorry, I didn't know the comment was blocking. But yeah, that's part of it. So that's what he said. I'm sure he'll pick his brain about his training and just how he takes care of his body. And as Ty says in the comments, Guerrero should harass CMC. That's a good place to start. I agree. I mean, if you have the best running back in the game at your disposal, and a guy, I imagine like Christian McCaffrey probably loves, like, telling people about his regimen and what he does. And so, yeah.
And please,
for sure.
He needs to please share that with Trent Williams, because I'm telling you, we need to protect him at all costs. Like, that is my whole thing this season, is Trent Williams needs to be protected at all costs.
You heard it here first. And I completely agree. But now with the draft behind us, all right, now we have to look forward to camp, OTAs, things like that. So with that comes roster cuts shortly thereafter. And so after the draft, I mean, some positions are getting deep. And one is the wide receiver depth chart. I would say, like, Ricky Pearsall, Jacob Cowing, both of those guys probably going to make the 53 just because they got drafted this season. But who I think is on the outside looking in? I think Ronnie Bell might be. You can maybe switch Trent Taylor and Ronnie Bell just because Ronnie Bell got drafted last season. So maybe they might have some belief in him still. But I still feel like this is not good for Ronnie Bell, just because Jacob Cowing is an immediate threat to his job. You could even say Ricky Pearsall. So both of those guys, definitely a threat. Danny Gray, I mean, again, Jacob Cowing, really fast receiver. So someone who could stretch the field. Danny Gray, probably the end of the road for you. And then, some veterans, Chris Conley. Tay Martin has been with the team for a couple years now on the practice squad. And then we have Tariq Owens, who's an undrafted free agent. I have him as an outside looking in guy just because he's an undrafted free agent. I mean, he's probably likely to end up on the practice squad. That's not to say that he can't make the 53 in the future, but I just don't think it's going to be this season.
There's definitely a separation of tiers, and I think you have it nailed. You have Juwan Jennings' name on there twice, just a heads up, though.
Ah, no wonder the list looks so long. I was like, there's no way there's this many guys.
Yeah. Nope. No, I mean, there's nothing more to add to what you say, to be honest. I mean, I think that's 100% it. I think this is going to be an interesting conversation more for the following year.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave that alone.
That's a story for another day.
I'm going to dip out of that one.
Good call on that one. All right, so then we have cornerback depth, which did get a little bit deeper with the addition of Renardo Green, but also the guys that they've picked up this offseason, right? Like Isaac Yiadom, you got Rocky Sin, Chase Lucas. So they added a lot of new guys. And so with Renardo Green, I think he's obviously going to make the 53, being that he was the second round pick. And so you got Mooney Ward, you got Lenore, Yiadom, and then Renardo Green, I would say, is the top four. Darrell Luter, I still think the 49ers do want to see what they have in him. I mean, obviously last season kind of derailed with his injury, right? But I think he's going to be able to show what he has this season. So he's going to stick around. I think on the outside looking in, you have Rocky Sin, Ambry Thomas, of course, who has been hanging by a thread for far too long, but still somehow ends up getting meaningful snaps. Chase Lucas, who the 49ers signed this offseason, Samuel Womack, Keeman Hall. Samuel Womack, another one that's like, the writing's kind of been on the wall, but now they finally have the depth, I think, to move on. So yeah, for those guys, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's a good point. 49er media in the comments here. Chase Lucas, because he has that special teams value, very much could make it. I guess this is hard to project how many corners they're going to keep on the team. And so if the 49ers do want to keep 6, which they could, it definitely seems like cornerbacks is something they want to emphasize. So Chase Lucas has a chance to make the team with that as well. So I guess we'll see. It'll be interesting. I just can't see the 49ers moving on from like Darrell Luter yet,
No, I agree. No, for sure. I think he's got a little bit more to put out there before they make a decision like that.
Yeah. And then offensive line did get deeper with the additions of Dominic Pooney and Jarrett Kingston. And then you also have a couple of undrafted free agents that they brought along, Drake Nugent and Bryson Mays. And so, look, you already have your starters, Trent Williams, Aaron Banks, Jake Brendel, Feliciano, McKivitz. And then after that, you have your backups, Jalen Moore, Pooney, Zakel, Spencer Burford. So I think on the outside looking in, Jarrett Kingston, I mean, tough. Like, you're drafted as such a deep team. But I see a spot on him on the practice squad. Brendan Parker, who the 49ers brought in as a free agent this offseason. Ben Barch. They were hyping up Ben Barch. So I don't know. But I think he'll probably just end up on the practice squad. I don't think other teams are really a threat to like snatch him up, for example. So I think he'll probably end up on the practice squad. Corey Luciano, and then Nugent, Mays, Sebastian Gutierrez, and their new international player pathway player this season is Isaac Alarcon. So he will probably be on the practice squad as well. But outside looking in for the 53.
Yeah,
but I'm happier with the depth. I think.
Agree.
Solid.
I'm still just a little hurt about not having a future replacement yet for my silverback, but that's all right. I think he's got another year in him, but I don't think. Damn, just gets harder the older you get, man. I just feel it for him.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Obviously, the 49ers are going to have a plan for that. They had a good one for when Joe Staley retired. So yeah. Is there another Trent Williams walking around somewhere that 49ers could trade for? Um,
I mean, but to be fair, like Trent got his first taste of a Super Bowl. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see what he looks like coming into the season for sure.
hungrier than ever, hopefully. But then defensive line, the 49ers didn't add anyone to the defensive line aside from undrafted free agent Evan Anderson. And so, to me, this is good news for guys like Drake Jackson, for Robin Beal Jr. They're going to get an opportunity once again to show what they have. They're probably going to make the 53. They'll be backups, right? Along with obviously Nick Bosa, Malik Collins, Javon Hargrave, Leonard Floyd. You got Jordan Elliott, Kevin Givens, Yetur Gross Matos, Kalia Davis as well. And then I think everyone, aside from that, is probably on thin ice to not make the roster, and that shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. A lot of these guys listed on the outside looking in column are guys who were on the practice squad last year as well, so they'll likely be on the practice squad once again.
Yeah, this is going to be this is going to be what I'm really going to look at as defensive line. I feel like, we lost Eric Armstead. We don't have a big answer for that. There's an option here for people to really step up, really show us what they got, look and see what the new defensive coordinator is going to do with this team moving forward. But I think it's going to be interesting given the positional players that we got from the draft. So they might put more stock into that secondary than they are focusing on the D-line. So it'll be interesting.
And Ty asked, Spencer Wagey still on the team? Yes, Ty, and you respect Wagey, man. Yeah, I'm a fan of Wagey just because I interviewed him last offseason before the draft. So, yeah, I mean, Wagey definitely someone I'm rooting for. And, yeah, he's still on the practice squad. He had been cut, and then they re-signed him. So, currently he's still there. 49er Throwback asks, are the 49ers changing their defense? They focused on the secondary more than the D-line. I think that tells you right there that there is a shift a bit in the philosophy for this defense. It's not like they didn't have chances at getting, one of the top defensive linemen. They had Johnny Newton available with their 31st pick, elected to go wide receiver instead. I think it shows you a bit of a shift, not just for the offense maybe, but also, the defense and the emphasis they want to put. I mean, even with them addressing the corner and safety depth, in particular the corner depth, in free agency, I think told us a lot. I mean, even leading up to the draft, we kind of already had an idea that they'd want to shore that up, and that's probably going to be the emphasis going forward. Now, I don't know if that's more of a like Brandon Staley philosophy or if that's just like in general kind of what they want to do. But yeah, I think that's definitely what I'm expecting for them this season. So interesting to see what that looks like. The run defense might not look great again, but I'm holding my breath on that one. We'll see. All right, here are the safeties. Now the safety depth, I don't see too much different than the draft, and I'll tell you why. Obviously, Malik Mustafa is they brought in, but Deshaun Gibson, is not back with the team. Now, there's probably a possibility that the 49ers could bring him back, and that might make some things interesting. But George Odom, I mean, he does have special teams experience as well, so he's likely to stay. And I don't see too much changing here for the safety depth. So not much significant there. Now, after 2024, I don't know, because this is a contract year for Hufanga, so safety depth could look different after that. We'll just have to wait and see. But for 2024, Hufanga's still in the fold, so that's good. And then as far as the running, oh yeah.
So I'm a big fan of Huff, man. I can't wait to have him back.
I know. I mean, I am too. I really don't think like he's gonna lose his job or anything to Mustafa. I think Mustafa's probably gonna immediately be a special teams guy. I don't think he's gonna take over immediately as like the starting safety, opposite Jair Brown. But again, like after 24, maybe we have that discussion. because Mustafa is good at some of the things that Hufanga is good at as well, which is like being in the box and, run defending, things like that. Running to the ball faster than everyone else. So there's some parallels there to their games. So we'll just have to see what the 49ers decide after this season and how Hufanga looks, coming off that ACL tear. But that's a discussion for another day. As far as the running back depth, you have Christian McCaffrey. No one is challenging that man. And then you have Isaac Guerendo. I'm putting Isaac Guerendo as the RB2, like, immediately, just because I do think that Kyle Shanahan, and this is assuming that Guerendo actually has a good camp, because as we know, that hasn't always been a guarantee for the round 3, round 4 guys that Kyle Shanahan has drafted in the past. But tentatively, I am putting him as a RB2. And then Elijah Mitchell, notched down in the depth chart. I have him 3, but I still have him making the roster. And then Kyle Juszczyk, of course, would be your 4. And then on the outside looking in, Jordan Mason, which people aren't going to love. Cody Schrader, the undrafted free agent that people are excited about as well. And Patrick Taylor Jr. This could be interesting. So obviously, outside of Christian McCaffrey, there's going to be some competition for how RB2, RB3 shakes out. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And this is going to be an underrated battle, I think.
Just think it could be a brittle, I don't want to say it. I don't know. I'm not going to hold my breath. Let's just put it that way. But there's just some injury-laden, it's just tough. I don't know. Running backs.
Yeah,
I can't.
We talked about Guerendo. Elijah Mitchell has had his fair share of injuries as well. But if I just read the tea leaves on who, let's just say, if it's between Elijah Mitchell and Jordan Mason, for example, the 49ers have showed us between those two guys who they prefer. Injuries or not, Elijah Mitchell is the guy who gets on the field over Jordan Mason for whatever reason. I'm not the decision maker there. I'm just saying that's how I see it. That's how it's played out. So that's why I have Mitchell getting the nod over Mason. But as some people in the comments say as well, Cody Schrader could make things interesting. So we'll see. I'm actually really excited about that camp battle when that takes place. Then we got linebackers. The only linebacker that they added in the draft was Tatum Bethune, and he was a 7th round pick. So I already have him on the outside looking in as well. I think if D. Winters and Jalen Graham could look good, serviceable, they're a lock to make this 53-man. So don't think about it too much. And Dre Greenlaw's probably going to start the season on the PUP list, so he won't count towards their 53 to start the season. So that's good, because then, that makes way for someone like Jalen Graham to make the 53 to start out.
Great.
Tight end is still kind of concerning for me. 49ers.
I was going to say that. I'm like, wow, we really didn't do anything about that.
It's not for lack of effort. They did try to get Eric Wright from the Lions. Ryan Wright? It was Eric Wright, right? Yes. And then so that would have been awesome. That would have been great. They tried. It just didn't work out. But then knowing that they didn't get him, I thought maybe they would prioritize getting the tight end in this draft. They did not. They got an undrafted free agent, Mason Pline. Shout out Mason Pline, rooting for him too, because he was one of the guys I interviewed this offseason as well. There's some upside there, but he hasn't played. Brock Wright, thank you, 49er Media. I knew it didn't sound right. I was like, Eric Wright, Ryan Wright. Okay, Brock Wright, sorry. So Eric Sauber, I don't know if he's really enough. You definitely shouldn't stop there. They could add another free agent, after the draft. Some of those guys could be available for a cheap veteran deal. I know Robert Tonyan is still out there. I wouldn't mind that. I know him and George Kittle are pretty good friends. So, but what I also wouldn't mind is Braden Willis and Cameron Latu actually panning out to to something. But we can't assume anything now in May, right? So 49ers do have to have a plan B for the tight end depth. So hopefully they do bring someone else in, because I'm not feeling too great about it right now.
Agree.
All right. Yeah, that's kind of the lay of the land going into rookie mini camp, OTAs, and in training camp. And we'll have a lot of discussions between now and then that'll probably change the order of, that depth chart we were just looking at. But all in all, I am excited about post-draft and some of the moves they made. It's clear there's goals that they want to add on both sides of the ball, things that we haven't seen before. And that's exciting to me. And it should, with Kyle Shanahan and these two new receivers, and the speedster in Garendo, assuming he stays healthy, I think the sky's the limit for this offense.
Yes, I think I tweeted this once the draft was done, something about how exciting the season's going to be, because you see maybe there's some shifts in the defense, there's some shifts in the offense. I think it's going to be airtime. We're just going to seriously see some balls getting whiffed down the field, and just it's going to be exciting, right? We still have our Christian McCaffrey, we still have our wide back and things like that, but I think there's going to be a lot more pocket passing, quick throws way down the field. It's going to be just exciting. I mean, this will be a great time to watch 49er football live in the stands for sure.
It's Brock Purdy's time to shine. I love it. I love going into the draft and not having to worry about quarterback at all. It's a great feeling, and clearly the 49ers wanting to build around Brock. So I definitely love it. Love everyone that tuned in today. So make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet, not just mine, but Desi's as well. And audio listeners, make sure you leave a rating, leave a review, all those good things. We love to see it. But for now, have a good rest of your Wednesday. I'm going live in 3 minutes with Emery Hunt to talk about the 49ers undrafted free agents. So if you guys are intrigued by some of those guys, like the Drake Nugents and the Cody Schraders, make sure you tune into that, because we'll be talking about those guys in my next show coming up. But for now, have a good rest of your Wednesday. It's Wacky Wednesday, folks. From me, from Desi, we're out. Peace.